God's Recipe, the natural alternative to Ritalin. Parents across America are receiving phone calls from their children's teachers, not to praise their progress in class, but to inform them there is a problem with Johnny. The problem? Johnny isn't staying up with the rest of the children. He's getting into fights at recess, and he's just not listening. The teacher has seen it hundreds of times. ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder. The most common form of treatment? Ritalin. Parents, trusting the advice of well-meaning professionals, are unknowingly starting their children on a cycle of chemical dependency. Is there an alternative? The good news is yes, and this tape will outline what has become known as God's Recipe, as well as letting you hear from some doctors on this very subject. God's Recipe is made up of very exciting natural health products. OPC grapeseed extract containing ginkgo biloba and a multi-enzyme product. This combination is making a huge difference in the lives of thousands of children and is a natural approach that works. Let's start this learning adventure with a well-known radio show broadcasted weekly, hosted by Dr. Joel Wallach.
Thank you and welcome to the Wellness Hour. This is Dr. Joel Wallach, your host, a physician and a veterinarian. I can tell you a lot of my patients say I treat them like dogs, but they seem to get better. We're going to talk about ADD, ADHD, hyperactivity, learning disabilities, and all kinds of related disorders. I used to be famous for this up in Portland, Oregon, where I practiced for 12 years. You used to see literally hundreds and hundreds, maybe as many as thousands of parents would bring their children to me who had these problems. And, of course, this was in the 70s and early 80s. People were just learning about Ritalin, and all the teachers would like to put these students on Ritalin. We're talking about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. They would want to put them on Ritalin. I think psychiatrists gave lectures to the teachers, so they were very aware of Ritalin. When a child was disruptive in the class, the first thing it would do is say to the parent, put the kid on Ritalin, and if the parent refused, the teachers would turn the parents over to the social services in Oregon, which were really hot to do something, and they would then take on the parents, and they'd say, look, if you don't turn the kid over to be put on Ritalin, the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to make the child a ward of the state, and the state will make sure that the kid gets Ritalin because it's good for the kid. And this is all based on a teacher's assessment of what was going on in the classroom. Well, what I got famous for was taking these kids and having them draw their favorite animal or plane or flower or house or whatever it might be prior to having breakfast in the morning, then having whatever usual breakfast they would have. It could be sugar frosted flakes, something like Pop-Tart, syrup on their Egos, apple juice, grape juice, Sunny Delight, these kinds of things. Then go to school, and about an hour and a half later do their same drawing again, and then compare the two. And what we found out was that a 6-year-old who could draw a giraffe that looked obviously like a giraffe, after an hour and a half following a high-sugar breakfast, would draw a giraffe, would look much like a shmoo. For those of you who are old enough to remember what a shmoo looked like, it was a pillowcase with eyes on it. And so we would recognize that this kid was sensitive to sugar. And, of course, we've talked about this many times on this show. There are people who are sensitive to sugar in all forms, whether it's natural processed, corn syrup, honey, molasses, and people are sensitive to sugar just like they are to alcohol. And there are good alcoholics, people who, for instance, if they have a drink, they might go to sleep. This is on one extreme end. They go to sleep. There's people in the middle who drink alcohol and just kind of get giddy and loud and boisterous, and at the other end of the scale, they become violent. And the same thing is true with sugar. Some people, when they take in sugar, get sleepy and drowsy. Some people, when they take in sugar, get agitated and boisterous. And then some people, when they take in sugar, get violent. And ADD, ADHD is somewhere in between those two extremes, because these kids or adults even get disruptive, irritable. They can be involved in domestic violence. Certainly they're not going to learn how to read, write, and do math. They're going to experiment with cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs as they get older, trying to find something to satisfy their cravings to be successful at, because when you have ADD, ADHD, it's very difficult to be a positive performer. And so what we did was take these kids and young adults totally off of all sugar, natural and processed, supplement them with 3 trace minerals. This was lithium, chromium, and vanadium. And lo and behold, usually within 24 to 72 hours, there is a significant benefit. The parents and the teachers immediately recognize this. And then within weeks, the kid would go from the bottom of the class to the top of the class. It has nothing to do with intelligence. And we actually saved thousands of kids from being put on Ritalin. And today, welcome Max James.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. And obviously, you've had a lot of personal experience. I was reading your materials. Why don't you share with our listeners how you got involved, a real estate agent basically, and somebody with military background. How did you get involved with ADD?
Yes, I have a wonderful son, and when he reached the age of 6 years and headed off to the first grade, after about 2 weeks in school, we got that what turned out to be a perennial call from the school teacher saying, we have a major problem with your son. He's disrupting the class. He's 2 weeks behind academically. He's got quite a problem. He's the playground bully, and you need to come talk with him. We were absolutely stunned. Our son had no behavioral problems at home, was the nicest little guy you ever want to meet in your life. So we thought perhaps there was an error, that maybe it was the wrong child. In any event, fortunately, we had a very bright and progressive first-grade teacher who suggested that if that were the case, what she'd like to do is have the school psychologist test him. And they did so, and a couple of weeks later called us and said they believed that he had a learning disability. At that time, this was in the late 60s, they called it hyperkinesis or hyperkinetic behavior, and suggested that we go to Stanford University and have further psychological tests done. We did so, and they determined that indeed he was ADHD, and that was going to be incapable of getting a normal education if we didn't do something to render him some assistance. The intelligence exams that they gave him indicated that he had an extremely high IQ, but simply was not able to utilize it and produce the results. So we were given three choices, Dr. Wallach. They said, number one, you can institutionalize him. And,
this is a 6-year-old.
This is a 6-year-old.
Okay.
I said, well, that's interesting. I mean, what kind of institution you're talking about? And having seen the Jack Nicholls movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
exactly.
I had visions of horror. And they said, well, he'll be in with quite a variety of children with learning disabilities up to the medical level of moron. And that just didn't seem appropriate for my son, given that we had had no problems with his social behavior in the home setting, in the family setting. I said, what's my next choice? And they said, well, you could try nutrition. And I said, great, fantastic. What do we do? And their response was, you've got to remove all sugar, you've got to remove red food dye, no more peanuts, no more this, no more that, no more...
Wait a minute, you said this is in the 1960s?
Yes, late 60s, probably 68, 69.
Okay.
I said, well, you know, I think that we might be able to do that at home. It sounds like quite a challenge. But what do I do about his meals at school? And what do I do about vacations and camp and visits at friends' home and birthday parties? What is the third choice anyway? And they said, well, we highly recommend the third choice. It's the drug of choice. It's Ritalin. And Ritalin is safe. It's a mild drug, and they explained it, and so that was the recommendation, and that's what we did. The results were immediate and wonderful. Suddenly the handwriting, which had been virtually illegible, became not only legible but quite artistic. And I had thought that the handwriting problem was probably genetic. I couldn't write. My handwriting was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So in any event, he suddenly started using three-syllable words, which his older sister had difficulty at that point understanding. And then the body made the adjustment, and a lot of that went away, and constant battles and with the appropriate dosage finally settled in, and we proceeded on a 6-year odyssey of my son on a drug that is more popularly called speed. The problem in my mind with Ritalin is that it works. He certainly was able to get an education. The problem with Ritalin also is the side effects in this case were, in my mind, devastating.
Parents who are just exhausted with a hyperkinetic child or one with ADD or ADHD, they get this relief from this drug Ritalin. Suddenly they can all go to sleep, and suddenly they can go on with their lives because the kid's under control and things seem to be going well and the education's going good, and they think they've solved the problem. This is why the medical profession and teachers can get parents kind of coerced into this because suddenly the major portions of their problems go away and they can say, whew, finally we get some relief here, and and we can go on with everybody's lives. Let me ask you something. Did they tell you to still, with the child on Ritalin, to take him off of sugar and supplement him with some trace minerals?
There's certainly no suggestion of trace minerals, no.
But they did say it would help to get him off of sugar.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. The benefits of the Ritalin, of course, were that he became perfectly adjusted in the classroom. But the side effects, Dr. Wallach, are what has created my passion to see if I can find a better alternative.
Sure. Well, what were the side effects that you saw in your son?
For 6 years, my son was on Ritalin, and they required drug holiday, which is we took him off on the weekends and obviously during holidays in the summers. And when he came off the drug, there were withdrawals, the symptoms of drug withdrawal, as well as what's now popularly called Ritalin rebound. So that about late Sunday afternoon, behavioral problems really were abundant. Huge blue circles under the eyes from the abuse of this drug, lips that were constantly chapped and bleeding because he was so dehydrated from this drug that he was constantly licking the lips, and that created the problem. Depression, moodiness. And
these blue circles under the eyes, we call them allergic shiners.
Okay.
Yeah, allergic shiners, and invariably there's something that they're eating, either sugar in one form or another, or maybe even dairy can cause that on occasion. And it's one of the signals that the child's in trouble when you see these blue, purpley marks under the eyes that we call allergic shiners.
Well, it was clear to us that he was in trouble from a growth potential physically. At the age of 12, he weighed 50 pounds.
My goodness.
And when he finished the 6th grade at 50 pounds, we sent him back to the farm in Tennessee, back to my parents. And, of course, went off the Ritalin, and he got on those good natural foods back there in my dad's farm and garden, and then an environment that was free without the pressures of the schoolroom and the classroom. And Dr. Wallach, he had a 60% weight gain in 30 days. Went from 50 pounds to 80 pounds and never went back on Ritalin.
Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely amazing. He was able to go through the rest of his secondary education, and in fact had an opportunity to redevelop and rebuild his self-esteem with a special program that at one time was provided by the University of Pacific here to help children with these problems. And he went on and got a college education and is a well-adjusted young adult today, but never back on Ritalin. I would hope that no one would ever have to go through that with their child.
Okay, so what have you been doing all these years since your son has gotten off of Ritalin? It says here that you're a tireless worker in helping people and going into the media and making sure that people know about this problem. Tell us some of your experiences.
Well, a little over a year ago, I was sitting in a lecture on nutrition, and a Dr. Chris Van Overen indicated that in his practice he dealt with a lot of children that were diagnosed as ADHD. And his experience was that many of them, not all, were unable to process or metabolize sugar. And that if you gave them a good multi-enzyme, the problem would often disappear. Well, I sat in this audience in total shock. I mean, I was stunned that I could have perhaps avoided putting my son through all of that pain and agony as well as the family by simply treating it with a nutritional supplement. And so I determined right then, that evening, that I was going to test it because, quite honestly, I didn't believe it. The route that we took in experimenting with nutritional supplements was to go with minerals, to go with a good, strong antioxidant combined with ginkgo biloba, and to go with a multi-enzyme and the elimination of as much sugar as possible out of these children's diet. The word just kind of spread, word of mouth, and the result has been, over a period of 10 or 12 months now, Dr. Wallach, that I receive phone calls every day, letters, people calling me, psychiatrists, medical doctors, neurologists, pediatricians, all wondering what we're doing. I'm not even sure I believe these statistics myself. I feel blessed by them. But I have not had one single case reported to me, not one, that a child has had to go back on Ritalin after going on to these nutritional supplements.